Who says Mikel Arteta doesn't give youth a chance? In one night, he's managed to nearly double the number of opportunities given to players in a single year. And of course, they returned. Quite the achievement. This is the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is our Raw Reaction Show, the show in which we discuss the images, pictures, videos, clips and analytics from the night before. And of course, yesterday evening it covered an interesting game, one of course that I don't necessarily think will be going down in the history books of the most entertaining fixtures, even with the number of goals that were scored. But Arsenal comfortably easing past Bolton Wanderers 5-1 on the night, which I think we can all take some comfort in that it was one of the more stress-free games. In fact, I've been yearning for a stress-free Arsenal game, both the North London derby and then followed that up with the Atalanta game and then, of course, the Manchester City chaos that we witnessed at the weekend. I'm just glad that we had a game that I could just enjoy, could just watch without too much hubbubaloo and just watch some goals go in, because it's been a while since we've seen the goals roll through an opposition side, and we never really had to, step things up all that much throughout the game, and we could start some of our younger players and then just enjoy the draw, which we'll talk about a little bit later on as well. But good morning to you all joining us live in the chat box. Thank you as always for doing so. Thank you for joining us on the mornings, 8 a.m. every single day. Hope you're doing good and well. Let's say good morning to some people who have joined us in the chat box, shall we? We've got Colin, we've got Pikahu, Matt G, we've got Paul and Clincy, we've got Adagoke, we've got Oda Relay, we've got Glenn, we've got Stevie, Black Shine, Arasilki, Tom, Damien, and Barry, and plenty more of you guys and girls as well. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. It is incredibly appreciated for you doing so. So thank you to you all. So yes, Arsenal 5, Bolton Wanderers 1. One of those games where the away support is always good, but ends up just kind of cheering whenever Arsenal ever kind of kick the ball out of play. It is quite amazing to see how far Bolton Wanderers have fallen since the days of Sam Allardyce, Kevin Nolan, Kevin Davis, JJ Kocher, of course, as well. Some real Barclays men, as you might describe them. Bolton, really have fallen down the table, and it goes to show what can happen if a football club, even at the Premier League level, is run poorly. But Arsenal's young guns were able to start the game and come away with the victory, with some drawing more attention than others. The lineup on the evening saw Arsenal's youngest ever starter, Jack Porter, 16 years of age, making his debut for the Gunners in goal. His performance was what I'd expect, to be honest. I don't think you can really go heavily into a 16-year-old goalkeeper's display. I was talking to a couple of people after the game about the goal that Bolton did score on the night, and without doubt, Porter kind of hesitates. He starts to go, and then he thinks better of it, goes back. And then the irony is that Collins, the Bolton forward, takes a heavy touch towards goal. And had Porter kind of committed to his initial closing down of the forward, he probably would have got the ball. But it's just that nervousness. It's just the fact that this is your first ever start at such an incredibly young age. Other than that, he did quite well. A few good passes, good collection from the corner at the end of the game to give him something to really kind of build his confidence. And someone after the game pointed out to me that the mistake he does make for the goal he conceded, it's a good experience, because I just think that he will never do that again. He will always commit to his decisions now. He won't kind of second guess himself, and it was a good experience, of course, to have. Nichols started at right back. I thought there was some elements of his game I liked, the confidence on the ball, the passing, the controlled nature of it. There were some elements that weren't as good defensively. It was slightly pushed off the ball too comfortably, but it was going up against, some League One players, more physically adept and only, again, 18 years of age, but there's definitely talent there. Kivior and Calafiori at the back did decently. Lewis Skelly, I thought, was good. Hopefully the injury that saw him come off at the end of the game isn't too bad. Declan Rice, of course, as well as Jorginho midfield. Nwaneri's the star of the show that we'll talk about shortly. And Saka, Sterling and Jesus were the front three. Now, there were some people that questioned why Saka started this game. I wasn't really one of them, I don't think, because as it was pointed out to many of us, he only played half of the game at Manchester City at the weekend. He came off at half time in that game because of a tactical decision. So, of course, like it was fine that Saka played and he came off again in the second half. I was talking to a few people about kind of rest and rotation and talking to people, of course, that know a lot more about the ins and outs of football than I do, and about kind of how you start certain players and how you give minutes to other players. And because Saka only played half a match against City, it was actually, it turns out, from their point of view, more beneficial for Saka to get more minutes ahead of the weekend after playing only 45. Because when your body is conditioned in such a way to be playing so much football over a certain period of time, even playing just half a match at the weekend, you want to keep that momentum going. You don't want to let him get too cold. So actually, in my mind and in the minds of the club, it seems it did make sense to see Saka start the game. And of course, build up some partnerships with the players that he otherwise wouldn't have been playing with either. And you do need, I think, you do need some starting quality in the team like this so that you can support those that are less well versed in the starting lineup. Declan Rice, of course, got things kicked off after a mistake at the back from Bolton that led him to have a kind of a free shot from outside of the box. Very good finish from Declan Rice. Part of his game, of course, he's always talked about wanting and needing to improve, and it was a very good finish indeed, slotting into the bottom right-hand corner, and there wasn't really much that Southwood could do about it in the Bolton net. But it was, of course, Ethan Nwaneri who stole the show in its entirety. Everybody wanted to see him play. Everybody else wanted to see him score and more. And he did get 2 goals on the night. The first goal, of course, comes from Raheem Sterling on the left-hand side, who only moments earlier had kind of messed up the chance to play in Ethan Nwaneri. He attempted a quick back heel that didn't come off, that would have seen Nwaneri clear and through on goal. He did make up for that with the cross that was pinpoint accurate to Nwaneri at the back post, who basically only had to get a touch with some help from the Bolton defender to see the ball hit the back of the net. And of course, it was him again that was in the right place at the right time to receive the ball off Declan Rice in the second half. And then with some certainly questionable goalkeeping, slotted in for his second, and certainly stake his claim in a confident performance. He, strode about the pitch with relative ease. He, was a good pass with the ball. He was confident and never really rushed into too many decisions. And I think it's a performance that is very, it's just a performance that gives you a lot of encouragement. I think that, this is a player who's got the thing, everyone talks about the thing that separates young players, from others, that you think you could recognize why they might start over others and get opportunities in the future over potentially other players. And Ethan Nwaneri has got that thing that I think that we sense and feel. The question now is when do you give him an opportunity at an even higher level to start a fixture? With Martin Ødegaard out, there is an opportunity here. There is a chance here for somebody to take that place. And I had said to you previously, with Fabio Vieira leaving, I always wanted to see any of the minutes that Fabio Vieira would have got given to Ethan Nwaneri, because I just think the investment of time is much, much better placed in the Arsenal youngster. So will he play against Leicester? I don't think he'll start, but I think we will get to see him once again off the bench. Moving forward to Raheem Sterling's performance, which was mixed. I think there were some good things. There were some less good things. Still, certainly, it seems getting up to steam, getting up to full speed. And of course, it's tricky to do that when you're mainly a substitute at the moment, as I would expect, Sterling's performance really to do. I do think that with what we can expect from him in the future is more of the good things that we did see. The runs, the speed. I think people have underestimated how fast how fast Sterling actually still is. I think people assume that just because he hit like kind of the latter stages of his 20s, that meant that he would not have that same speed as he does before. He's still very quick. And he runs in behind very, very well. His left-footed cross, of course, was good. And he managed to get his goal in the second half as well. And managed to get kind of a little kind of right place, right time, which is something that you do expect from an experienced player. Saka, again, causing issues on the right-hand side. Saka was, an absolute pain for Bolton on their left-hand side all night. And while he didn't managed to get a goal. He was influential in so much of what Arsenal did, as you would expect. But Raheem Sterling, I think, is a decent performance from him, starting a game, getting a goal, getting an assist. You've got to be happy with that. And Kai Havertz, of course, finished off the run and finished off the evening with his goal as well. More good work on the right-hand side, eventually leading, of course, to that ball that led to Havertz, basically like Nwaneri in the first half, just needing to get his foot on it. But he does well, actually, to finish it off the way that he does. And very indeed happy to see him come off the bench and get yet another goal during this brand new season as well. So Kai Havertz scoring again. There's not too much to go deep into things in terms of kind of the analytics of the game or what things mean, because I think we can do more of that in part two. I do want to finish off part one, though, by looking at the draw, which did take place last night. Brentford will face Sheffield Wednesday. Southampton play Stoke City. Tottenham play Manchester City. One of either Newcastle or Wimbledon will play Chelsea. You'd probably expect that to be Newcastle. Manchester United play Leicester. Brighton Hove Albion play Liverpool. Aston Villa host Crystal Palace. And Arsenal will travel to Preston North End. Arsenal being one of only 3 of the Premier League sides in the draw to get lower league opposition. Spurs and City facing one another certainly is of a benefit to Arsenal. Newcastle, who we expect to beat Wimbledon, facing Chelsea, is definitely of a benefit to Arsenal. Man United getting a relatively easy tie at home to Leicester, but I mean, they just drew last night in the Europa League against FC20, so don't rule that one out. And Liverpool going to Brighton knocks out one of the more challenging sides, as well as does Aston Villa against Crystal Palace, but you'd expect Villa, of course, I think, to progress through there. But Arsenal, I think, will be very happy with their draw. It should give them the opportunity once again to field some of their younger players, but also mix in some of the older ones. The game, of course, will take place not for a little while. And of course, we'll see Arsenal continue their Champions League run as well. There's just so many games to play at this point. But the fourth round ties will take place in the week commencing of October 28th. So that week is the week after Arsenal host Liverpool and the weekend before they go to Newcastle United. So I suppose it's a bit of a frustrating one to have to travel up north to Preston and then travel up north again to play Newcastle. But playing a lower level opposition side is probably the best that we could have hoped for during that week. So that is definitely a very one I think that we all would have picked. I think that's fair to say. And when you look at the teams that's still in the draw, you had Wimbledon or Newcastle, which is probably going to be Newcastle. You had Sheffield Wednesday and Stoke City. One of Sheffield Wednesday, Stoke and Preston were the ones that teams wanted. We managed to get that. And it got down to the point where we could have got some others like Aston Villa or Crystal Palace, which you wouldn't have wanted necessarily, especially away from home. So, yeah, it's definitely a positive one, that. As is also very positive for you is the opportunity to strengthen your reinforcement of internet security by using the best VPN service on the network, which is, of course, our good friends at Nord. And if you go to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or indeed a 2-year plan. It's absolutely a must in 2024 to have a VPN network giving you the security and safety that is provided to you online. And you can get that extra 4 months on top of a 2-year plan just by signing up to it too. And if you go over to the link that is found in the description, or as I've mentioned already, nordvpn.com, you can get yourself that significant discount. So do go and check it out. There is a 30-day money-back guarantee for those that aren't happy with the service for whatever reason. But if it gives you, it does give you the ability to change your geolocation digitally online, which is a absolute must. And of course, you can win a signed and framed Bukayo Saka Arsenal shirt, courtesy of Football Prizes. Best of luck to those, of course, that have already entered. And I'm curious to see if anyone was successful in the last prize, which you can see on your screen, which was the Ben White and Calafiori competition. But it is currently the Bukayo Saka shirt, which also has some instant win prizes, including a signed and framed Gabriel Jesus shirt, a signed Martinelli shirt, and a signed Freddie Ljungberg shirt. So loads of opportunities there to win some great Arsenal memorabilia. Link, as always, is down in today's video description. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Okay, this is part two of the show where we jump into the chat box and tackle some of your questions and more. Very curious to get some of your thoughts on obviously yesterday's game, but some of the wider nuances and context and narratives surrounding the fixture leading up to this weekend's game against Leicester City. Only 2 more days before Arsenal play again. The games are coming thick and they are coming fast. So let's jump into the chat and get some of your questions and queries. Use that capital Q. It does certainly help us stand out. Temi says, I thought Arteta doesn't believe in youth and only played Emery's youngsters. Well, he certainly put that one to bed yesterday. I have to say, though, had he have not played the kids yesterday, my goodness me, there would have been it would have been an absolute meltdown. That said, I will say he actually played more than I thought he was going to. I didn't expect Nichols to play. I didn't expect him to give so many off the bench as well opportunities. He doesn't tend to do that too often. So maybe this is the sign of change. I will say that all the criticism that Arteta has got from my perspective on the whole youth integration thing, I feel it is because this season is the first season I really feel that we've got the opportunity to do it. Like, this is the first time we've played lower league opposition since we played Oxford in the FA Cup. That was 2 seasons ago. And we didn't have the same, kind of youth elements in the squad at that point that were going to give us obvious candidates to play in those games. I think, what did the scoreline end in that? Was it 3-0 to Arsenal? Let me just have a quick check what the squad was that day that we played Oxford. Nwaneri scored and Nketiah scored 2. So our team that day when we went to Oxford was Matt Turner in goal, Tommy Asu at right back, Rob Holding and Gabriel at the back, Kieran Tierney at left back, Lokonga, El Neni, Fabio Vieira, Bukayo Saka, Eddie Nketiah, and Gabriel Martinelli. Now, on the bench was Marquinhos, who did come off and did play. Xhaka, Zinchenko, Smith Rowe, and Ben White. There was also Nathan Butler-Oyedeji was on the bench, which, maybe at 76 minutes when you're 3-0 up, you could argue that Arteta could have brought on Butler-Oyedeji, but at that point, he had already made, well, there was 5 subs in the game. Tierney, Tomiyasu, Vieira, Lokonga, and Saka all did come off. And Marquinhos did come off the bench to get some minutes, I guess, for himself, a young player that was signed, I think, during that specific summer transfer window as well. So, yeah, it has changed. I think that there is an element of now Arteta feels he's got the squad and the depth and the quality throughout the team to be able to rotate more youngsters in to get their opportunities should indeed they come. And he was obviously very happy post-match with the performances that we saw from some of those young players. In his press conference, he was asked about that, and he says, yes, it was a really positive night. The result, the performance, we gave minutes to a lot of senior players, and they really showed a lot of quality tonight. And on top of that, we gave a lot of opportunities to quite a lot of academy players, and they responded really well. And it's so fulfilling to see their faces, their reaction, and how much it means to them. Per Mertesacker was, of course, in attendance as the head of the academy, and it was said apparently he was quite nervous ahead of the game, just really wanting the absolute best for the youngsters, of course, that have come through this Arsenal academy. Ethan Nwaneri, of course, he was asked about, and he says, on the second one, I was really hoping for him because he scored. I'm very happy because, I know the reaction of his teammates if he wouldn't have. So I think overall, again, he was really good. I think it was a really strong performance for him. I think he really feels part of us. You can tell that he's playing with that confidence, that belief, and the understanding of what he needs to do on the pitch. So very impressed. He was also asked about Raheem Sterling and said, yeah, it's very good. I think he's getting better and better. And I think physically you can tell he's making steps. The moment the game opened up a little bit, you know what he can do and how he can deliver. And he was involved in a few goals. So very positive night for him. He was asked about David Raya's injury, and he says, we don't know yet. He's got a muscular injury. So we don't have much detail about the issues of Raya. Of course, coming up are games against Leicester, PSG, Bournemouth, Shakhtar Donetsk, and of course, Southampton as well. So there are some tricky Champions League games. We do have Neto available to us should indeed we need to make those changes for the upcoming fixtures. For the Premier League games, certainly, hopefully it's not going to be too bad, but you'd hope that Raya's injury is not too serious and that hopefully he's going to be okay to play. He was asked about why Jack Porter was selected, and he says, Jack has been training with us since pre-season, and we're confident he can do the role. Obviously, he plays in the international team. We've seen what he can do, and we believe he was the right choice. He was also chosen because both Tommy Setford and Lucas Nygaard, who signed in the summer, are also both out injured at the moment. So that is another reason as to why he was, of course, picked, which is important to point out. He was asked also about switching off from football in between a quick succession of matches. This is the last kind of point I want to touch on from the presser. And he says, at the moment, it's not easy. Obviously, the time we have at home with our families, the rest of the day we are preparing one game, thinking about the next one, the lineups, the travel, the game states we can face and how to be prepared for that. It's really busy, but it's what we want. We had an incredible week in every sense, emotionally, physically, in terms of learning as well as a coach. We had an issue we had to deal with, and for what I had in my mind in the international break to actually what happened and the players we had available, it was very difficult, but it's been good. And I think that ultimately after the international break that did see Arsenal lose, Martin Odegaard that had issues with, Ricardo Calafiori, of course, Timber as well came back from the international break, not necessarily 100%. And I think we've seen the response has been great. What we've seen over the first start of this season, 6 games, 4 wins, 2 draws, 7 games. Is it 7 or is it 6? I think it's 7, right? We've beaten Wolves, Spurs, Villa, and Bolton. 4 wins, 2 draws, 3 draws, isn't it? Because you've got Brighton, City, and Atalanta as the Champions League game. So yeah, 7 games, 4 wins, 3 draws. 2 of those draws coming in the league against Brighton with 10 men, City with 10 men. Basically, every game that we've had 11 men on the pitch at the full-time whistle, we've won. And sadly, the ones that we haven't had 11 men on the pitch, sadly, we have drawn, but we haven't lost those games. And I think it's really important that when you come up against adversity, as Arsenal, of course, have this season, that they have responded. And that's definitely a good thing. Oderile says, not a question, but more of a statement. Oh, why have you put the Q there? You're trying to fool me. That's not how this works. That's not how this works at all, Oderile. However, I'm still going to read out your comment. Developing our young means that we don't always have to dip into the transfer market, and playing them increases the transfer value of those others for profit as well. You're absolutely right. Moose says, do you think that Maldini Kukuri has been eating all of Nichols' food? He's absolutely massive. He's a big lad, isn't he? Yeah, and Nichols is obviously a lot slighter in his profile, but both of them, had the opportunities to play. And I think I saw a thing on Twitter saying that Maldini Kukuri is the first Albanian to play for Arsenal. So that's quite a nice little stat. Lee says, Tom, I remember when Rooney hit the scene. If you're good enough, you're old enough. Maximilian says, Bolton and Preston are 2 of the founding members of the English League. Can you name the other 10? Oh, my goodness me, Maximilian. That is quite the question. No. It's difficult to do these things because I have to wait for you to say yes or no, which takes time. So no is the answer to that question. I can't name the other 10. Dara says, Tom, what did you think of Miles Lewis-Skelly? I thought he had a brilliant game, very strong and calm on the ball. Passing was very good as well. Was involved in the build-up to a couple of the goals, I believe. And yeah, really, really good indeed. Khan says, what were the negatives you spoke about with Sterling? I thought he did really well. Obviously, there were a couple of moments where he just kind of overplayed it a little bit. The misplaced pass to Nwaneri, if he had maybe just played it a lot more confidently instead of trying to back heel, that would have been better. There are times where I think he holds on to it for a little bit too long. That's the only real criticisms I've got. Everything else was really, really good. Owen says, whilst we are praising the youngsters for being at the level, I think it's obvious that some aren't, such as Maldini Kukuri, who looked very shaky in his technical ability. What did you make of him? It's difficult to judge. He's come off the bench. He's got a few minutes left in a game where Arsenal were dominating. Bolton have got nothing to lose at that point. Tactically, it's a really difficult environment to enter the game at. And I mean, nerves are always going to be a big thing for these youngsters. The more minutes they get, the more confident they'll get. The imposter syndrome will wear off. So I'm not too concerned about that. When I look at a player like Omar Rekic, for instance, as I did in the summer at 22 years of age, have the performance that he had against Bournemouth, that's the difference between a player that I think you look at and go, yeah, he's not going to make it. But I've not yet seen enough from the others to have much of a thought process on them. Rob says, Tom, would you not start Nwaneri against Leicester? If we don't against any bottom 3 or newly promoted / likely to be relegated clubs after he's just scored 2 goals with Odegaard out, when are we going to? What more do you need? I think the obvious answer to this is that Arsenal will have looked at the performances against Spurs and also against Manchester City, where Trossard played in that midfield position, Havertz up top. Has Nwaneri done enough in a game against Bolton where he scored 2 goals that The first one was obviously, with all intents and purposes, good positioning, a tap in. The second goal, goalkeeper should save. So it's not like those two goals are the defining difference. The overall performance was good. It was enlightening. It was definitely worthy of significant praise, but it doesn't guarantee you a start in the next Premier League game. And I'm very conscious of jumping the gun on this and being too fast. What I do think that it's worth doing is bringing on Nwaneri with a good half an hour of the game to go. That's I think the next step for Nwaneri. It's giving him that extra. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon of jumping too quickly into these things, starting these players in these games, because if he does start his first Premier League game against Leicester and it doesn't go great, like all of a sudden that changes a lot. I think you have to bed them in still slowly, and we're doing that. We're doing that with those players. So no, I wouldn't start him against Leicester. I think there's a chance that you look at that Southampton game that's coming up, which I think is going to be important to consider as a potential fixture, because you've got Leicester at home, then PSG at home, and then Southampton at home. If you give Nwaneri a couple of sub opportunities in the Premier League and the Champions League in the next week, then maybe you can think about starting Nwaneri against Southampton. But I don't think I'd do it quite yet because of just because I don't think it's the right time. I just think I'd wait another week and give him another sub opportunity or two in the next two games. King says, isn't the Leicester home game the perfect game to start Ethan? It's kind of the same question. Trossard got sent off, so he shouldn't start. Kai is best up top. Trossard was suspended for this game. Trossard is back available for the game against Leicester, and I imagine will probably start. But I think I've kind of covered where I'm at with the Nwaneri starting thing. It's important, I think, not to just bow to the pressure of and the excitement of it. I think it's still about managing a player's minutes in the best possible way. John says, just want to say congrats on the new digs. Thank you, John. Very kind of you indeed. Matt G says, Tom, do you know how Chido Obi Martin is getting on at Manchester United? I don't even know if it's been fully confirmed, to be honest. Chido Obi Martin. I don't think it's been confirmed yet. I don't think he's joined Manchester United officially at this point. So far, nothing has been done. I'm looking on here and I'm seeing I do not see I do not see anything about this. Obi Martin. There's actually an article that's gone out this morning from the Manchester Evening News. So this is the section from the MEN. United weren't expecting any problems with the approval of Overy and Lusail, as fans can relax in the knowledge the same can be applied for Chido Obi Martin. There is a particular excitement about the signing of the prolific youth striker from Arsenal. As of this week, a source said United are still waiting on the ratification for Obi Martin, but an agreement was struck in July and he should be confirmed sooner rather than later. So he hasn't officially actually joined Manchester United at this point in time. So we haven't got any update on that. Still one of the most hilarious decisions of a footballer, in my opinion. I know he's only 16. I just think he's getting some really, sadly, I just don't think he's getting the best kind of advice at the moment about what he needs to do. Like staying at Arsenal would have been absolutely, at this stage of his career, no doubt. The faith that Arsenal gave in him, the chance Arsenal gave in him. We've kind of done the Obi Martin thing to death a little bit, but there's concerns for me that spread well beyond just Obi Martin personally, and it will be things that emerge in Arsenal's near future. I think not anything that Arsenal have done specifically. It's more external. Satori says, Kia ora, Tom. Do you know when Tierney will be back and he will be used in the team? Surely he starts over Zinchenko. Zinchenko's out, of course, at the moment for weeks. I don't know when Tierney's going to be back. He doesn't start over Zinchenko at the moment. I think that it's very quick to forget the level of what Tierney is at the moment. He's going to have to get back up to speed. I don't think we see Tierney until it's difficult to know when we might see him. If he's back for Preston, maybe we see him there. Maybe that's where we see opportunity for Tierney to play. Izzy says, Tom, what do you think about Koja Dubry going to Brighton to only go on loan to Blackburn and play only 40 minutes of football and then play for their under-21s? I think these players need better advice. I think obviously there is an argument for some players without a doubt, but Koja Dubry, I don't really necessarily disagree with his decision to leave the club. He's played 14 minutes in 2 games in the Championship so far, and then he's playing the EFL Trophy as well for Blackburn while he's on loan from Brighton. There was a lot of hype around him. He had a decent pre-season. He scored in pre-season for Brighton. they were really excited about getting him in, but so far has not really done anything. And as I say, he's played for Blackburn in the Championship. He's come off the bench in the last 2 games, with 1 minute on the on the clock with the game against Bristol City, where they were leading 3-0 at home. Came off the bench with 13 minutes to go away to Preston, of course, which is irrelevant for Arsenal. And didn't necessarily offer anything in terms of a goal or assist to break that deadlock. So I'm not sure that Kojadubri is the best example here, is he? I think that Chino Obi Martin is probably a better example for what you're alluding to. At the end of the day, Mario Kojadubri was not going to be, I don't think, making it with Arsenal. But they did leave it a little bit too long to try and agree that new contract, which meant we didn't really get anything beyond what I understand to be, what went to a tribunal. Both Kojadubri and Raw Waters' deals went through a tribunal, but I don't have any information about the amount of money that was due to be paid to Arsenal. Jason says, Nwaneri played a full game last night, so should not start at the weekend. Trossard will be fresher after a week's break, which is definitely a good point. Shepo says, Tom, where was Salah yesterday? Of course, relating to Salah Ad-Din Uladum Hand, the young midfielder. I don't know, just wasn't picked for this game. It's worth pointing out that Salah Ad-Din is 21 years of age. He's so far I'm looking at he was on the bench for the game against Brighton earlier in the season, but he's not been in any of the under 21s squads so far during this campaign for whatever reason. He has been training. I was at the training ground ahead of the Atalanta game, and I did see him during that game. He did play in the EFL Trophy match. I don't know though. It's always weird because these these games and these kind of EFL trophies and youth league games, they're all different kind of categorizations of youth football. And sometimes players can play and sometimes others, because he's 21 years of age, sometimes they can't. So I think that there were, to my understanding, kind of proposals made at the end of the summer window, but it just never really worked out. There were definitely approaches, I think, for Salah at the end of the window. But I think that because Ødegaard got injured and Mika Marino got injured as well, the Arsenal weren't necessarily, to my knowledge at least, too keen on him leaving. As a 21-year-old, he's got more seniority than some of the other younger players. And I think the injuries that Arsenal suffered meant that any approaches that came in for Salah Ad-Din weren't necessarily as warmly welcomed after those issues. So it's interesting. I think you're right to point out and ask why he wasn't involved in the squad yesterday, especially because our midfield is quite light. And even though I don't think there was a single youth, like Lewis Skelly played left back, Nwaneri played attacking midfield. So yeah, box to box wise, maybe he could have been doing with being on the bench. But they thought otherwise. Thomas Partey was, of course, there. But yeah, that's as much as I know on the Salah Ad-Din situation. Ruben says, I usually listen on Spotify, but Thursday means that I can get involved live because I'm working from home. Did you see the kit leak news on Footy Headlines, Tom? It sounds promising. I did. So this leak news is that Arsenal's home kit next season is set to return to the usual red and white with no other colours on it. Like the last 2 seasons, we've seen, of course, blue on the Arsenal kit, hence the design of this year's graphics for the Raw Reaction show. And of course, gold on the season before that to celebrate the 20-year anniversary of the Invincibles. But next year's kit will be just red and white, and return to something that we've been, and also have the normal badge, not the cannon. So those rumours of Arsenal switching their badge to just the cannon have not been the case. I certainly was made aware of that quite a while ago. There was no plans to kind of completely change the badge officially to just a cannon. That's not been in the works, as far as I'm aware, at least. And that was never going to be the case. And there was a set to return to the normal badge next season. One Song Soup says Salah was going to leave last year as well, but for some reason the deal didn't go through. Technically, he's got a lot of potential. Mike says, will there be a preview show this week? I'm really hoping so. I'm hoping there's going to be one tomorrow. So I'll be leaving a note in the Discord server to do a preview show ahead of the game against Leicester. So watch out for that tomorrow afternoon. BA21 says, if Arsenal will not win no trophies at the end of the season, who should be questioned in your opinion? Kroenke, Arteta, Edu for making the squad short. I guess we have to wait till we get there, BA. We have to see why Arsenal didn't win any trophies. Was it because of a lack of signings in the summer or in January following up? Was it because of decisions made by Arteta? We won't know the answer to that question until then. But it's quite nice that I've not been asked that question for a little while. And I think the reason why I've not been asked that question in a little while is because the mood's pretty good. We started the season very well. We've won games that we didn't win last season. We've gone to Manchester City and nearly beaten our closest rivals, of course, were it not for some really bad luck and bad decision-making by an official as well. And of course, that could be said about the Brighton game too. We've, gone to Atalanta and kept a clean sheet there after a difficult performance. And we're through in the League Cup to the next round very comfortably after bedding in some youngsters. So the season started really well. And I don't think anyone's really thinking too much about decisions about placing blame anywhere. It just gets really tiring, doesn't it? And Damien says people can't wait to blame Arteta, and I do. It's not the time for that conversation. It's pretty boring, topic at the moment. It's just not something that we are in the mood for talking about. Hughie says, Tom, do you see the midfield reaching a balance soon? And if so, what would it look like for you? For me, it still really lacks a connector and a threader. That's because he's injured. And that's because that player you're looking into is Mikel Merino. It's gutting that we've lost Merino and that he's been out since, of course, he arrived because of that injury. I cannot wait to see the Spaniard back. I cannot wait to see what he's going to offer. I saw him yesterday, actually, in the mix zone. No sling, moving pretty comfortably. I saw Timber as well. He was walking fine as well, for those that are worried about any potential injury. He wasn't limping. Both Mikel Merino and Timber moving very comfortably. But there are things, of course, that you can't tell by just someone walking past you. It's very difficult to know that. And I'm looking forward to seeing both. Especially, of course, Moreno. Timber as well. We wanted to be back for the weekend. Hopefully that'll be all right. But Mikel Merino, fingers crossed, we see him back in the squad very soon and we can start seeing him finally make his Arsenal debut and showcase why exactly Arsenal signed him, because it's a bit like, he's an unknown quantity right now. And I think he is that connector and that threader, Yuki, that you point out that we've been missing. So yes, I'm looking forward to Merino being back. If you've not, by the way, and I'll be taking some more of your comments, dropped that press on the like button. I'm not sure if I mentioned at the beginning of the show, these raw reaction shows can be sometimes a bit of a challenge in our 1K per day optimism and hope and ambition. So if you could be ever so kind to drop a like on the video, that would be incredibly appreciated. So please do not hesitate. Please do help us out. Dan says, Tom, have you ever seen rival players, mainly City, as rattled as they are right now post our 2-2 draw? No, I've not seen a club as rattled as Manchester City. Manchester City are incredibly rattled by us. Incredibly rattled by us. They can't stand us. They absolutely despise us. And I imagine you'll see some stories still come out in the fallout of this game from the weekend as attempts to try and sully Arsenal. It's just predictable, isn't it? It's just predictable we're going to hear more fallout from this City game, more attempts to unsettle Arsenal, which is just hilarious. I've never seen such a fallout from a game, but it shows you that we're under their skin. It shows you that they are threatened by us, and that's the reality. Jacob says, I don't understand why we see Arteta challenging Pep for the title, but still people want him out. Who else do you bring in? Because people just like that conversation. People just like that chat. They like that debate. It's not really a debate at the moment, is it? Emil says, looks like we don't crumble over problems like injuries anymore. Strong is our club culture and relationships. We've done very well. In the stead, we haven't lost a game this season so far, and we've taken on 2 huge challenges without our captain, 3 huge challenges really with Atalanta involved in that too, and we've come through those challenges and we remain unbeaten. Lib Gunner says there's over 1,000 of you watching and only 290 likes. Come on, guys, need to make sure you're not freeloading and make sure you press that like button as well. Damien says, you only get hate when you become a problem to the status quo. I'm fed up of people saying how they like us. I love being hated by everybody. Arsenal says, Tom, are you noticing the media heavily criticising Raya for time wasting or pushing the narrative of Rodri being targeted? So we're all talking about that instead of clearly the alleged question marks of Michael Oliver. Look, I think that the whole kind of Raya dark arts. I was trying to go the whole show without saying dark arts, but I've said it there. I saw a brilliant tweet this morning. Someone saying that Mikel Arteta has become the 8th defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts. That did make me giggle this morning. I was thinking, if anything, surely he's the perpetrator of the dark arts rather than the defense against the dark arts teacher, would he not be? Every team does it. Every team does these things. But when it's Arsenal, it's a topic. People don't like us. People want to kind of say things about Arsenal that just kind of generate. It's worth pointing out that Arsenal have probably the most engaged fan base on the planet. They have the biggest engagement farm of supporters of any team on the planet, I think, maybe alongside Barcelona. So it's very beneficial for anybody to really try and rile up Arsenal, because we as supporters, as Arsenal fans, lap it up. You're talking about it here, you're asking me here, you're tweeting about it, you're talking to your mates about it, you're reading about it, you're watching things about it, because we are the most, I think, in the Premier League, without question, we are the most easily rattled fan base. We are the most reactive fan base. And yeah, we lap it up. We lap up people talking about us. We're not a magnanimous fan base. We're not a rise above it fan base. We're just not. I saw a compilation that lasted for, I think it was 300 seconds yesterday, just highlighting Rodri's kind of how bad Rodri is. It was like a compilation of all of Rodri's mistakes as a player. It might have been significantly longer than that now, actually. And like that's the pettiness of our fan base. You can say all you like about us. Like, I love us as a football club, but as a fan base, we are far from perfect. Far, far, far from perfect. So yeah, that's always going to happen. That's always going to be the case. So yeah. Avinash says, do you think that this kind of added scrutiny on Arsenal and United by the media will ever be shifted to teams like City or Chelsea in the coming years? It is also worth pointing out that we as Arsenal fans are much more privy to kind of a bias. So we perceive things differently to how Man United fans, Chelsea fans, Spurs fans, Liverpool fans, etc. Like Liverpool fans, I speak to Liverpool supporters quite a lot because I've got a few friends who are Liverpool fans, and they feel that referees and VAR is against them. They feel that the media is against them. They, from my perspective, always, other fans feel like the world is against them too. It is completely psychological. We always feel that there is going to be a heightened sense of injustice towards us. I think personally that the Arsenal do, and I know it's arguably a contradiction, because I think that, while I too, as an Arsenal fan, have that same, I'm still susceptible to it as much as anyone else. But I still do think that Arsenal are treated poorly, more poorly compared to others, be it, views from fellow contemporaries of mine in the media, or of course by officials as well. There's just always this sense that Arsenal are, I think it was Micah Richards, of course, that famous quote that Granit Xhaka brought up in his Players Tribune interview, where he talked about, Micah Richards saying about how when it's Arsenal, it's a thing. Whenever it's Arsenal, it's a thing. And it's true. Like, if it's something to do with Arsenal, it just creates something. Like, it just feels like that we have a big kind of like come get us flag attached to us all the time, and we have to deal with that, and we do deal with it as best we can. But it's it's tough. It's frustrating, and it's just a reality that we have as supporters. Ruben says, I saw a ridiculous report that Arsenal officials are worried about Carragher and Neville and the Northwest clubs pushing an organised agenda against us. Soup says, they say that the likes of Man United, Real Madrid have the most fans, but it does seem the way our fans engage that we have the most fans. I think we might have, as I said, the most engaged fan base on the planet. And that would probably be a fair thing to say. Avanes says, do you think that this kind of added scrutiny on Arsenal and United by the I think I've already done that. But that theme, I think, is going to be a regular theme that comes up again and again, not just this season, but continuously. Richie says it's not just the reactions of our fan base that the media use, it's also the rivals' engagement with more Arsenal headlines. I don't like. Have you seen like West Ham fans, since Declan Rice has moved to Arsenal, have in particular taken a bit of an issue with us? Aston Villa, of course, I think there's something of a rivalry with us and them as well that's been tried to be artificially generated. Brighton, the whole Brighton kind of links, courtesy a lot of Andy Naylor's athletic coverage of us, which I do find so ironically funny with the Moises Caicedo situation. It always, and the red card stuff more recently too. Like it always feels like Arsenal have got these individual and like mini rivalries with teams. It was a bit like that with Crystal Palace for a little bit as well. But that's kind of died off now. Arsenal's record against Crystal Palace has since become very good. So that's not in place as much as it was before. So yeah, I think that. I think there's question marks there. King says, what did you make of the article about Partey and his role he played in Rodri's injury? It was ridiculous, says King. Partey had absolutely nothing to do with like the increasing the chance of that injury happening. It was a very normal kind of moment at a corner. Rodri's leg just gives way. It's a really innocuous. ACLs always are suffered 9 times out of 10 in really innocuous ways, in just unfortunate and unlucky circumstances. The suggestion that Partey was culpable for Rodri's injury and should face any kind of significant blame because of that, I think is silly. Like, just from a personal opinion, I think it's silly. I think also within that there was a description of the goal that we scored that suggested that the ball rebounded out to Calafiori, when of course actually it was Martinelli who passed to Calafiori, which wasn't a great look. I'm not a fan of the pylon of the journalist. You know, I empathise from a journalistic standpoint. We're human. Everybody makes mistakes, and I'm not a fan of like the abuse. That's not to say that you can't criticize. Absolutely. You know, I think that there's ways of putting your criticism across. And I think there's ways of not putting your criticism across. And we've talked about that with referees recently as well. You think about Anthony Taylor having to take a week out of Premier League action and coverage because his family and himself has received so much abuse, which is just not okay. It happens, you know, and it should be scrutinized. And mistakes should be scrutinized. And I think you're entitled to point those out, to point those errors out. Whether if it was you know, from my perspective, if I make a mistake in an article and people come to me and say, Tom, what you've written here isn't correct, and here's why, and you're 100% right, I'd be putting out things saying, look, I hold my hands up, like I've got that wrong. I'm trying to think if I've had an error. In a piece. I'm sure I have. But nothing kind of like high profile, just like doing like a commentary of a game. I've kind of like, there's like a case of misrepresentation or whatever of like last night, I had an absolute mare last night at the game because I forgot my glasses. If I'm at the game and the Emirates now, obviously it doesn't matter when I'm watching the game on telly, but at the Emirates, I'm getting that bit older where I need to wear glasses at the game. And I last night, because I've just moved house, I forgot my glasses. So trying to spot like who was on the ball from like the corner, and I was like in the far end of the press box near the clock end in the West Stand, and like trying to see what was going on in the upper and the North Bank penalty area. There was a challenge. Like, mistakes happen, but like I think that you absolutely are within your rights to point out mistakes and to highlight and say, look, here's a mistake that's been made. This needs to be changed. I'm not a fan of the pylon of abuse, though, ever. Like, that's just not okay. Like, there's way of scrutinizing. There's ways of highlighting things. But there are things that just aren't okay in any scenario. And sadly, some people just take it too far, as always, because they know that social media provides them a veil of anonymity that, sadly, if they didn't have that, they wouldn't be doing the things. And maybe someone that's listening to this right now has done it themselves. Maybe you've directly tweeted or directly DM'd an Arsenal player after a poor performance and said some pretty unsavory things. I really hope that is you, that you learn from those mistakes and that you learn that that's just not okay and that's a bit weird. Frankly, it's weirdo behavior to do that. So I'm not saying that, you know, it's not something you might have done in your youth that you look back on now and think, yeah, that was weird behavior. I shouldn't have done that because it makes me a bit of a weirdo to have done that. But at the end of the day, it's about education and learning that that's not all right. Scrutinize, criticize, absolutely. But that's what's important, you know. That's what's key in those games. Freddie says, who do you commentate for? I do the minute-by-minute text commentary for the Football.London live blog at games. So that's who I was doing last night. I don't think I made an error in yesterday's. Despite not having my glasses, I still think I came through yesterday's game relatively relatively well. I have got the benefit of a screen being in front of me, which was definitely of a big use. Um, let's go to Avinash. Says one thing about this whole media and football outrage on Arsenal was done for me is now that I'm even more behind Arteta and the team. Just seeing them wind up so many figures only proves our progress. That's a really good point. And as a fan, I've mostly seen other fan bases make fun of us for being soft. Now seeing them fume over the best team in the league not being able to defeat us with a man short is quite the change of tone. You're absolutely right. Snake Eye says, I was so proud of all the kids last night, 16 and 17 years of age. Ethan in particular was class. Absolutely. And Yeri says, hi, Tom. How can Newcastle United employ Amanda Staveley back as our owner of Newcastle United? Amanda Staveley. I've not seen this story. Amanda Staveley's left. She left Newcastle ages ago. She left in July of this year. I'm not sure what you mean. Is there a story going around at the moment that I've missed? Amanda Staveley. No, I'm not seeing this story, mate. To be honest. So yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, Adyeri. King says, I didn't like the article, but I would never go personal or overly critical. That doesn't help either, but I don't understand what there was to gain from that angle of the article. As I said, you're more than entitled to scrutinize, anyone's writing as long as it's done in a respectful and measured way. And I saw plenty of measured criticism of said article. I saw plenty of unmeasured and unfair criticism of the authors. I'm not going to link to it because I don't need to encourage any more of an extra pile on somebody that's already, of course, faced plenty of. I have to say, I think one thing that I do take issue with, and it's something that I myself have been guilty of in the past, and I've learned from, is if you have more followers on social media, I think that comes with an element of responsibility. That if you've got a very engaged Twitter or Instagram or whatever, any level of engagement, certainly I think comes with a level of responsibility. That if you quote tweet or directly at articles, if you want to put a print screen of an article paragraph and say and have your say on it, you're more than entitled to do that. I don't have an issue with that at all. But I do have a bit of an issue with accounts that are quite big, that have got tens of thousands or in some case hundreds of thousands of followers, that quote tweet people or kind of tweet out or at people directly. Because all that's going to do is encourage a significant pile-on from lots of anonymous followers. Does that make sense? I just feel like there's an element of responsibility that some people don't necessarily think before they type sometimes, that generates kind of a bit of it increases the chance of the person that you want to scrutinize fairly receiving quite a significant amount of abuse from followers that I hope at least that you hope that you didn't have. Ruben says, I thought Jesus' play for the Havertz goal showed us that the something out of nothing factor that we've rarely seen. Yeah, it was a really nice move. Twice in the game, Jesus lost his boot. I think someone needs to have a look at his laces. He needs to tighten his shoes up a bit more, because I think twice in the game he lost his boot and still managed to play on and slip a couple of times because he didn't have his boot on. But yeah, that was quite funny. But he did really well to nutmeg the player and then get the ball into a dangerous position for Havertz eventually getting on the end of it. Derek says, hi, mate. Reports saying that Mourinho is back in training. Is there any update on Tomiyasu? Sterling needs games and minutes. That's evident. No update on Tomiyasu yet, mate. It's a really weird one, the Tomiyasu story. It's Arteta, when he last spoke about him, said it's he's in the first stage of this return, which would indicate for a knee injury that it'd be something significant. It is knee injury, I believe. So, yeah, it's tough. It's a tough one with that. With Mourinho, I've not seen anything about. I've not seen anything on that regard. Saya says, Tom, at which point do the journos take responsibility for such shameful, almost unethical journalism? When does it stop? I mean, if there is genuine evidence of unethical, irresponsible journalism, as I've said, you have the right to scrutinize it. Without question. Like, at no point do you have the right to send abuse to anybody, but you absolutely have the right to criticize, the written words. And at no point I said that you're not allowed to do that. You have the right to do it, um, and highlight it as well. I just think there's ways about doing stuff, and there's ways to not do stuff. You don't want to lower yourself to certain levels. You don't need to do that. Like, you can raise it, you can question it, you can criticize it without getting abusive. And I think that's always important to point out. So yeah, I'm not a fan of some people's work. I'm a bigger fan of other people's work, and I've talked openly about my own criticisms of some of the things that have got said on certain platforms. I'm in a privileged position to be able to do that. Talk Sports support the channel on the audio side of things. Those that listen on Spotify will know that we're the fan representative for Talk Sport, and I like that, because Talk Sport in essence is from Arsenal fans, has received scrutiny a lot, and I like being the kind of the Arsenal voice on that side of things on the audio side. I like us being the voice on that to bring kind of our own measured approach to things. And I've disagreed with a lot of what Jamie O'Hara said, or what Jason Cundy said, or what Simon Jordan said, or a lot of people on the platform. But I have and that was one of the key things that I spoke to, when I was in discussions about the channel on the audio only side of it. It's nothing to do with YouTube. YouTube's completely separate. But on the audio side of things, I said one of the things that was really important to me when we, started having discussions about where we were going to be the fan representative on TalkSport for their fan network was, am I going to be able to criticize some of the views of the people on TalkSport? That was one of the things that I asked, and they were like, your opinion are your opinion. You can have your opinion on what things are said. You can scrutinize it. And there's a line, there's a line of where you are able to go, and that line stops at abuse. But if you are able to constructively criticize views of other people on the same platform that you have links to, I think that's fair enough. And that's why I was open to doing it and open to joining up, because they said that, yes, you can have an opinion, you can criticize, you can scrutinize, and have you're not in any way shackled to anything otherwise that you wouldn't have already been talking about. And that was a big benefit. So it's important to be able to criticize things. Rob says, where do we access the audio? If you listen on Spotify, all right. If you like this show, as always, goes out on YouTube first. That's why I always encourage you to listen on YouTube. But as soon as the shows are done, I take the audio and I upload it as a podcast to audio platforms like Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music. And if you listen to those, you'll hear at the beginning of that the little TalkSport insert. So it's not anything specific. Like, we are the fan representative on their fan network for us, as the Arsenal representative. So yeah, and they've supported us for 2 years, and they've done some great things for us. They've improved my ad reading a hell of a lot, and got the podcast out to a lot more people that have now found the channel as a result. So yeah, I think it's definitely been a mutually beneficial partnership that I've enjoyed, and I've not had to change anything about the way I do to put that out. Arsenal says, Tom, am I the only one that thinks ever since the Newcastle game last season that it almost seems like certain pundits in the media are instructed to back the refs? The silence of the propaganda is unreal. Again, it's always worth pointing out that this is the way that we absorb it as fans. We always feel as Arsenal fans that it's us against the world sometimes, and I think that's always going to have an element of bias to it. But I've pointed out before that I'm really sick and tired of the way that Arsenal do get perceived, the way that Arsenal get talked about, the way that Arsenal get scrutinised, seemingly to me more heavily than other teams. But that's why we have to fight the good fight, people. That's what I say. We have to keep fighting the good fight from an Arsenal perspective, and putting across what I think is a measured and grounded approach, and a more realistic view of the club. And I think we do that as well as we can. Anyway, that is going to be. We're going for nearly an hour now. You can tell I've got a day off today. Still got to unpack plenty of boxes this morning and this afternoon. But thank you, as always, so much for tuning in. It is incredibly appreciated. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Thursday. And without it'll be quicker than you know it, we will certainly see the game on Saturday come around very, very quickly. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate your time. Stay safe. Stay well. Stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.